Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mount podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. In this episode, we talk about the one life. We talk about agents of circulation, laws of karma and rebirth, and the masters of wisdom. And we basically recap since our last episode. And we're incredibly honored and grateful to have you here. And if you do like this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. And now, back to the podcast and the start of Season 3. Well, this is the start of, we're going to call it Season 3. And it's been a minute since our last episode, but even if you're listening in order, you're not going to notice that. But we last recorded on Halloween, and we covered some of the traits of Scorpio, but focused on the Hydra. And since then, maybe we could just do a quick kind of recap of some of the current global energetic landscape. Some of the forces of light and darkness that are manifesting in the world, and how all these unveilings are happening, seemingly one after the other, of sometimes institutions or ideas or even personalities that we keep seeing the veil ripped apart. And it's like anywhere you focus the lens right now, the facade seems to crumble.
Well, we know that the word apocalypse in Greek originally meant revelation.
Right.
So you reveal by removing the veils that block the light of truth. Mm-hmm. And that can be apocalyptic, because if you're associated with the veil that's being ripped away or removed, it's very painful. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the last broadcast we did, it was Halloween and on Scorpio. Scorpio doesn't just happen once a year, because Scorpio rules anyone that's treading the spiritual path. By the spiritual path, I'm not talking about religious, I'm talking about somebody who says, wow, I'm part of this one life. Let me be fully engaged. Let me contribute to the good of the whole, whatever the phrase is. And so it's said that on the path of discipleship or the path of service, Scorpio rules. And that would be the same for humanity. Humanity, when it treads the path of, if you like, spiritual evolution, Scorpio rules. And the Hydra is a slippery creature. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe we could briefly recap about the Hydra, yes, because I think what we're seeing in the world now is this whole struggle with the Hydra, and so I don't know where to begin. Maybe to say, for instance, that there are three symbols associated with Scorpio before we get into the Hydra and on all of that. There's the scorpion, which represents our personality, which is always sort of at war with itself and war with others. And the scorpion can sting. And then when that is transcended and you move into more of a soul awareness, the scorpion changes into the eagle. And the eagle always represents the soul that is not bound by earth. It's got its wings out and it soars. And it then can see from a greater distance. It has a greater perspective. It has perspective, has compassion. And then the eagle, there is a final shift from the eagle to the dove. So when the soul then aligns with the deep spirit, the spirit of peace, the spirit of purpose, because in the Ageless Wisdom teaching, the center where purpose is held and burns is also called the center of true peace. So you've got these three symbols: scorpion, eagle, and the dove. And we know, for instance, looking at this country, the United States of America, we have the eagle as a symbol. At the moment, though, we seem to be acting out the scorpion. And we've got a long way to go till we get to the dove. So that's just by way of showing the spiral of ascent. So the beauty of Scorpio is that every sign is associated with a test for Hercules. And Hercules in the Greek mythology represents the soul. And in order to master all the challenges of Earth, each month in each astrological sign, Hercules is given a task. And in Scorpio, he has to defeat the 9-headed Hydra, which is also called the Serpent of Desire. So the thing we have to realize that this Hydra, these 9 heads, they represent 3 challenges on the physical, emotional, and mental plane. And when I name them now, I think everyone's going to recognize them and go, wow, that's what's happening right now. So the 3 heads that represent the tests on the physical plane are sex, physical comfort, and money. Neither good nor bad, but this is the testing ground. And the 3 heads representing the tests on the emotional plane or the astral plane are fear, hate, and ambition. And then the 3 heads representing the tests on the mental plane of the mind, pride, separateness, and cruelty. So if we look around the world now, we see this in action. We're being tested everywhere about the right use of energy, whether it be our own sexual energy, financial energy. Have we got an economy that really honors all its constituent parts? Do we have feelings that are not poisonous, that they don't pollute the atmosphere, that they don't reinforce separation? And do we have a mind that isn't full of pride and separateness? And when we want to get our own way because we want to aggrandize the self, it's so easy to turn to cruelty. Cruelty doesn't have to be physical violence, Joey. It can just be a word spoken, a look. It's anything that demeans and harms. So we can get into how Hercules eventually overcomes it, but those are the 9 heads of the Hydra. Those are the tests facing humanity right now, and we are seeing it played out in political forums, social, economic. We're seeing it everywhere on the stage. So, what's your take of how we're doing with the Hydra?
It was always striking to me when I first discovered what the apocalypse meant, what the root of that word was, and it's also hard not to think that that's what we're in. This is the great revealing, and I'm fascinated with the developments of AI, and it's in my short lifetime, it's almost half a century, but I've never seen anything develop as quickly. It's almost impossible to keep up with the development of this up until now just was like a science fiction. And then on this parallel path, if you imagine a train track, so on one rail we have this incredible development, and then this other path we have the continued playing out of this drama that this where one brother can't get along with another brother, and now we're going to go to war. And it's just
right.
It's fascinating to watch these two paths, and there's a lot of speculation. We've had episodes, about AI, and then watching this going on and thinking, is there a way? Rather than can we even save ourselves? Like this idea of can we save ourselves, or do we need saving, or how? What's the critical mass of which enough people are awake to make this difference? What moves the needle?
What moves the needle is when the heart breaks open and you realize that, the whole object of the exercise is for love to flow, is for loving kindness to flow between people and nations. And AI will supercharge any state of consciousness. We can be in a separative state and we want to rule the world, and so we weaponize AI. Mm-hmm. Or AI can actually give us all the information we need, not the wisdom, but all the information we need to make an informed decision. Mm-hmm. Whereas wisdom is the loving application of information in service to the world. And so I see AI as a great servant of gathering information to help us be more informed. It is not a substitute for the wisdom that comes through the soul, that's harvested through all the seasons, all the incarnations of direct experience. There's a very big difference, and I know that we'll probably do another podcast on AI, and yet what we're seeing now is with the rapid technology, we use it to further our ends. If the ends are selfish, then AI is an incredibly powerful weapon. Or it's an incredibly powerful servant to tell us, look, here's all the information. Here are the trends. Did you realize that in 10 years' time, sea levels will be rising this many inches or centimeters in this part of the world? This is a fact. This is what we project. Now, the wisdom is what we do about it. Now, that comes from heart and mind together conferring. So, AI is part of the mix, and it's growing rapidly.
How does that work with, the idea of like the laws of karma and the laws of rebirth? I mean, because it's the accumulation of human intelligence, right? It's learned from everything that we've written and everything that we've produced. So it's a hypercharging of the human consciousness. But I think it is interesting that, the Mayan calendar did sort of, end in 2012. And that's kind of where, if you look back, you're like, 2012 is where things started to get spicy,
Yeah.
So is this now just like sort of the shaking up of the Etch-a-Sketch for this new cycle of the Mayan calendar, or however you want to chart it? Are we in a cycle of rebirth, there's going to be chaos?
Well, there are different teachings that give different perspectives. For instance, the lineage that we come from, which is the Trans-Himalayan mystery tradition, it talks about the years leading up to 2025, which is next year,
right?
Called the age of the forerunner. This is when we're preparing for the breakthrough of the new, the appearance of a greater presence of love in the world. For it's the preparatory work, and what you do when you prepare is you clean house. I've got guests. I better clean my house. Well, there's a guest knocking on our door. It's the presence of a greater love. Our house is not in order.
That's for sure.
So we got to clean house, and we got to welcome in this guest. And funnily enough, this guest is not an outsider. This guest is the true nature of who we are. It's that deep love that lives at the heart of all beings. And yet we haven't created a space where it can reside. We haven't had a homecoming for it. And so the age of the forerunner is doing whatever we can to clear the field. So two things. One, you clear the field, and then into this clear field, you consciously bring in that which needs to be planted. We go back to seeds and soil. However, if you talk about 2012 and the Mayan calendar, we are in an age now where we're transitioning between two eras. It's between Kali Yuga, Satya Yuga, if you want to use the old Vedic terminology. And Kali Yuga is the toughest one. That's when the real battles take place. Kali Yuga is that's it. It's working the stuff out. Satya Yuga is the emergence of a golden age, the emergence of the flower once the conditions have been created for the flowering and once the seeds have been planted consciously and lovingly. At the moment, we don't realize that we're here preparing the soil. If I am self-centered, Joey, then all I can think about is Michael when I wake up. How am I going to get by? How can I get the most out of this? How can I do this? And then we think about, we need to be selfless. But I think a lot of us don't know what it means to be selfless. You think, selfless, then I can't be myself. This past weekend, I attended a celebration of life gathering for a friend who died a number of weeks ago of brain cancer. There must have been 80, 90 people gathered there. Many words were spoken, many tears were shed, much laughter and joy and music. But the theme that carried through the whole thing and what everyone remarked about with this person is that they always gave. They gave freely from their heart, selflessly, whether it was, cooking a meal or making cookies or helping with some healing modality that they knew, they were always present. And even when they were going through this incredible process of being eaten alive by the brain cancer, where their body changed, and from this, on the outside, this beautiful person, radiant, in full life, being reduced basically to a skeleton that couldn't move. And yet the love was still pouring from this person. And a lot of us really were touched. And I spoke to several people who said, yeah, we're going to go away and think, well, how am I showing up in life? Is my giving conditional? Am I giving so I can get something back and to be known, to be recognized? Or am I simply giving from the heart because that is what my soul is called to do? And I came away with a little mantra for me, which the way to get the most out of life is to give to life. It's just as a reminder. So I think that's the tipping point. When we move, as we've said before in these broadcasts, from being egocentric to ecocentric, when we move from being self-centered to centered around what serves the whole. And then when the whole is healthy, it takes care of all of its constituent parts. I think we're at this point now that if we do not make the shift from self-centeredness, where the part tries to make itself the biggest and best thing around, we will end up with cancer, because that's what cancer is, when one thing takes over the whole thing and just multiplies. And a good friend of mine, a few months ago when we were in conversation, talked about traffic in LA, and it's sometimes you get gridlock. And he said, but the problem with society at the moment with selfishness, we've got greedlock.
Yeah.
We've got greedlock. Energy is not flowing because it won't circulate. We won't give it, pass it on, pass it forward. We are not agents of circulation of the one life. We're there to take what we believe we need because we don't realize that the whole thing is interconnected. That's where separation is the killer.
I know for me, since we did the last podcast, we talk about the one life. We talk about this idea that we are Gaians. We are of this planet.
Yeah.
And that's really seated for me. It became more than just words and ideas, and really became a way in which I really see the world and see myself. And I see this planet as people are just what this planet does. It produces, we are very much a part of one system. And it's really changed the way that I see everything.
Well, thank you, Joey, because for me, the whole, the bottom line we said when we did this podcast on being a Gaian was that human beings live on the earth. They move around, and sometimes we pay attention to nature. But Gaians know that the whole of earth lives inside of them, and they live inside the whole earth. So the real difference between a human being and a Gaian consciousness is a human being lives on the earth, a Gaian lives as the earth. And when you live as something, there's no separation. You understand that I am the system. And then when we understand that the human species is an important link in this whole chain of being that is the planetary life, we realize, my God, we're the missing link because we are disconnected. How can we be a link in the chain of blessing if we're disconnected? So the reconnection was to shift from being human to Gaian. That was just a sort of a way of reminding ourselves that we are part of something greater, and we play our part by serving the greater system, which is, we're not taught that. We're taught to be the best. And competition is the survival of the fittest. We misunderstand Darwinism.
That's for sure.
Darwinism had to do with the best form that could be created to serve the indwelling life. It wasn't, Planet of the Apes. It wasn't who's got the biggest club.
Right.
Will reign.
Right. There's a manner of adaptability and malleability, and the best reaction to any given action is.
But we see, if you look at if you take Darwinism in a totally different way,
Mm-hmm.
you and I are working at letting go of old conditioning, letting go of old patterns, creating a new form of being that does justice to what we sense inside.
Mm-hmm.
That's conscious evolution.
Right.
We are consciously participating in evolution because evolution says, I want a form that can truly express the promise on the inside. And then there's this gap. There's always a growing gap between what we sense on the inside and what we're able to deliver on the outside. And the problem at the moment in the world, the gap is so big. And we don't understand that our whole reason for being alive is to be part of this great experience called the one life, called planet Earth. It's still, how do I get by? How do we get by? If it's a nation or if it's a community or if it's an individual, if it's a political party, how do we win? How do we win?
Mm.
So we have to redefine what success is in a human society. The American dream has actually become the American nightmare because it's taken everything, it's drained resources, and at the end, people don't feel any happier at the deepest level.
Mm. That's for sure. Yeah.
It was a scam.
There's a whole level, there's a whole sea change of redefining terms, I think, that needs to happen. There's that idea that, if you can't necessarily fix a system within a system. You need to create a new system if one's not working. And it's obviously this is not working. So, but it does feel like, I'm not a complete pessimist. It feels like we're on the precipice of hatching a new idea. It's the Pluto return for the United States.
Yes.
And that involves a conversation of how we want to proceed through the next cycle. And I think that's, whether we realize it or not, that's the kind of conversation we're having. And it's heated. But I think there's also an undercurrent. There's more people now more than ever that are mindful. There's an evolution, I believe, of consciousness. I was looking this up, the idea of empathy. And, I was just kind of Googling some things. And, the use of the word empathy, or the idea of empathy, really didn't even take hold until the 1920s. It just wasn't an idea or concept that was even really present. So that's, for only about 100 years, we're not doing too bad in terms of evolution.
Because the heart began to open.
Right. Is that something that, if we look at the wisdom teachings, Alice Bailey teachings, is there, I know addresses that we have to move from the head to the heart, but is that something that is, you can relay almost like a timeline map?
It's not a timeline measured in chronos, tick-tock time.
Right.
It's a qualitative cycle. Mm-hmm. So we've reached a point. Change happens when you reach an inner point of magnetization and potency, and then it precipitates on the outside. Mm-hmm. For instance, how do you bring love in the world? Well, you fill your life with acts of loving kindness. I'm thinking back of when I was a schoolboy in the south of England in the chemistry lab. We actually got to play with a lot of dangerous things. They would not allow now. I mean, flames, acid. Right. It was incredible. But one of the things that stuck with me was creating a super saturated solution. Mm-hmm. And then at one point, it precipitates. So for me, is if I fill my life with love and allow life to flow through me, my whole being becomes super saturated, and at some point, I become a precipitate of a greater love. I become an agent of that. I actually become a demonstration of that. Not a demonstration to show how good I am or what, but suddenly, love has taken over. Mm. Love is now informing me, right. And love is now expressing through me, and it can only come through a heart that's open. And one of the things that opens the heart is empathy. And I think a lot of that came after the First World War. I've told the story before. My grandfather was in the First World War. He signed up when he was 17. He was a stretcher bearer in France, having to haul out all the dead bodies and bring the wounded out on backs of donkeys. And I mean, it stayed with him all his life. He was so traumatized by that. And you realize most families in Germany, England, a lot of other countries lost someone. And so there was this empathy for loss, common loss. And that there's something, in order to love, the heart first must be broken. I know many people can probably relate to that in your own personal lives. That once your heart is broken, it's painful, but then you realize you've got a greater capacity to embrace love. Because it's not a selfish. My heart's broken because I couldn't have what I want. But you realize what love is. Love is a universal elixir. It's the lifeblood of everything. And so how do I allow it to flow through me? Not to hold on to it, but to allow it to flow through me. And as it flows through me, it nourishes me. And as it flows out into the world, I can be part of the nourishing of the world in a very impersonal, non-egotistical way. It's just that I become this portal through which love can flow. That is what the Ageless Wisdom is teaching. And then they say this presence of a greater love, and in some of the teachings it's called Christ consciousness, can only be born in the cave of the human heart. And I think we mentioned this before, Joey. What the world is facing now is the first collective initiation or test on the path. And it's called, it's the first initiation. And it teaches us that we cannot live by bread alone. It says that you have to have a deeper source of nourishment than the materialism of our current society. And therefore, we have to detach ourselves and free ourselves from the addiction to being fulfilled by filling ourselves full of matter. And realizing that true joy and true peace and true harmony comes when we're filled full of love. And that is free. It doesn't matter how much you got in your bank account. You can access love. You don't need a bank card to access love. You need a heart that cares. And once you open your heart, there's limitless funds. It's limitless. And then we have to dare to put it into action each day, because the world still operates under the old rules. And it'd be foolish to walk into a freezing ice storm with no clothes on, just because you believe in standing in the naked truth of who you are. You're going to freeze to death. So, you dress accordingly.
Dress appropriately.
Dress appropriately, but love. I know this sounds a little sort of not quite pie in the sky. I do believe that this is the reality that we're being invited to step into. But at the moment, all the sounds are battle sounds, rallying cries for war, to support this position. And rather than to support the power of love to transform.
Does it require that we go through that? I mean, does it require we come to this sort of, you can't help but look at the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. And it's interesting that you can use that phrase, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, at any point in my lifetime. It's been going on. It's been going on for thousands of years. And it's like it's like this crucible about which we kind of refuse to learn.
Well, the reason we have to face it is because this isn't a written exam we're taking.
Right.
This has to be embodied. This is why we're incarnated. We're incarnated to make the word flesh, the truth has to be experienced and be expressed in form. Otherwise, it's just vaporware.
Right.
I mean, it's just wonderful words on a wall. This is the time to embody it, and revelation is the revealing of the inner truth through an embodied state. So we have to go through this. We have to face each other on the battlefield, and then realize that, oh my God, I am my sister. I am my brother. We are one human family. What are we doing? But because of the old covenant says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And until that covenant is renewed to a deeper and higher covenant, the cycle of revenge will continue.
Mm.
And it will be justified. Well, this is what the scriptures say, or this is, if I don't, I'm weak if I don't respond in this way. We haven't understood the power of love, how incredibly powerful love is. It can change everything in a second.
Yeah.
It can transform, it can disarm by melting this ice block that lives inside the human heart that brings callousness instead of caring.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it boils down to something very simple. It's not standing up and giving a soapbox speech on, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this. It's maybe saying some things at the right time when it's appropriate. But if I don't practice this each day in every moment that I'm offered, those words are not going to carry power.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got someone like Mir Baba, and there's a Mir Baba Center just up the hill from where we are. He spent, 40-something years in silence, and yet he exuded love and touched so many people without saying a word.
Hmm.
It's the emanations coming from the heart of who we are. It's not the words coming from our intellect. So I don't want to engage in a conversation to talk about something. I want to engage with others in seeking to live into what it is that wants to be born.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because when we looked for like message or guidance from the esoteric traditions, like what's going to help humanity at this juncture? I guess it comes down to, how do we apply these principles in our daily lives, and how do we foster that spiritual growth so that we become the lighthouse?
Well, let's go back to our friend the Hydra.
Okay.
So how does Hercules in the end defeat the Hydra? And by defeat, I mean overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're told that the Hydra lives in the mud, lives in the ooze. Interestingly, that's a mixture of water and earth, which is the physical plane and the emotional plane mixed together.
Mm-hmm.
And it lives in the earth. And you can't mud wrestle the Hydra. It'll drag you under and you'll drown. And the thing with the Hydra, when it sticks its head up, these 9 heads, if you take a sword, which is your intellect, and cut off a head, it sprouts 2 more. There is only one way, according to the wisdom teachings, that you can overcome the Hydra: for Hercules to go down on one knee, to kneel. And kneeling is a sign of humility. And you kneel and you reach into the mud. You grab hold of this slippery creature and you firmly bring it up into the light of day. You lift it up into the air. And when it is exposed to the light and the air, which is the Buddhic plane, that's the level of intuition and love, it loses its power. It only has power when it's in the mud. And so what Hercules does is lifts the Hydra up. It loses its power. He overcomes it. He doesn't kill it. It evaporates, it dissolves, because it no longer can be sustained. It's only sustained by living in the lower regions, by living in hatred, by living in the mud, in darkness. And for me, that is an incredibly powerful image of what we're being asked to do. How do we lift ourselves from the mud, from the ooze that we've got ourselves into? Well, we have to lift ourselves into the light of a new day through love. And then the other dissolves. Now, there still may be people who are warring and wanting to kill and wanting to do all these destructive things. And yet, in the end, love prevails. It is incredibly powerful. And I know there are people thinking that when things get really bad, we're going to get bailed out. The forces of light are going to come and take care of the bad people. And
I think
doesn't work that way.
I don't think it works that way. I think we're here to figure it out for ourselves.
We're here to figure it out ourselves, and we do have help. We have mentors. You see, the beauty of being in this classroom on planet Earth is that we have people who I call postgraduate humans. These are the inhabitants of the fifth realm, the realm of souls, who are embodied love and wisdom. They've gone through it. They've graduated, not just with a certificate, but their whole body reverberates with the light of this wisdom. And we can call upon them for mentorship. And this goes back to the Vedic texts, to the notion of the avatars. And so we have the doctrine of the avatars. And maybe we could just touch on that briefly. I know we're sort of jumping all over the place here, Joey, but
that's okay. We're jumping back into it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting because I had written down a question, and I'm glad that you sort of segued to it naturally. But what do you see the role of Masters of Wisdom playing in guiding humanity through this critical period of transformation? So, I mean, you arrived at it.
Well, yeah. Thank you. And what I want to do is just collect my thoughts, because what I don't want to do is to give a talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share my understanding of these ancient texts. And what I see at the moment is we're at a point where some of the old prophecies, it's like, oh, right, this would happen now. If this is what is being talked about, then okay. The doctrine of the avatars, basically, you can read about it in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is really the wise being, the master. And he really then gives Arjuna on the battlefield guidance and wisdom. Now, the doctrine of the avatars says, whenever there is a withering of the law and an uprising of lawlessness on all sides, then I manifest for the salvation of the righteous and the destruction of such as do evil. For the firm establishing of the law, I come to birth age after age. That's the promise. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to come to bail us out, but it comes to remind us of the law. There's only one law, and that's love.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't know how to follow the law of love or the pathway of love, we have to come up with millions of other laws that tell us what we can't do. It's the only one law that tells you what you can do or are requested to do, the law of love.
Yeah.
Everything else says what you can't. You can't do this, you can't do that. The law of love says love. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Love thyself. Love God. Love everything.
That's interesting.
And so you talk about different traditions actually are waiting for the arrival of these avatars. Mm-hmm. If you look at the Jewish people, they're still waiting for the Messiah to arrive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Islam, some of the sects in Islam are waiting for a being called the Imam Mahdi. And for Christians, it's the return of the Christ. And for a number of Buddhists, it's the coming of the Lord Maitreya. I believe that the appearance of the presence, I'm not saying it has to be an actual personage, sort of a physical package called the Christ or the Maitreya, but the overlighting of the presence of these beings will call forth in us that which lives at the heart of who we are, which is love. Mm-hmm. It will call forth that, but it will also call forth everything that stands in the way. It's like the final battle, because there are parts of me that don't want to give up, that are still selfish, that still need to hold on, that still need to take. I still need to be a pirate and a plunderer because I don't believe in something, or I don't have the heart to give and receive love. So this inner battle happens inside of each person, and then between nations, and between peoples, between races, between cultures, until we reach the point where we realize the whole thing is based on love and then we live as love. I mean, that goes back to living on the earth, living as the earth. So basically said, well, we have to be loving. No, live as love. That means love is the note that we sing, that we sound. It is the resonance between all of us. Now, I would love to have an experiment where for a week, humanity says, yeah, okay, I'm going to suspend disbelief, and maybe for a week, let's practice loving kindness. I've heard these Buddhists say loving kindness is the solution to everything. Okay, let's test it. We've tested greed for several centuries now. It doesn't quite work. Let's test loving kindness. And then let's compare notes afterwards. How do I feel? How does the world feel? Wow. Is this something we want to go for? All in? So, but it requires not just a debate. And that's the thing with debates. Mm-hmm. It's the exchanging of fixed positions. It's like swords, and you can have a sword fight, and then somebody wins or thinks they win. Who won the debate? Mm. That's the question after. Well, who actually won the debate? Well, so-and-so scored these points. Well, what does winning mean? Winning for the planet means that love suffuses the whole of its beingness. And guess where that is lacking and missing at the moment? Inside of humanity, because we're disconnected. We're disconnected from the lifeblood. So everything that we're facing now with this first initiation, understanding that we cannot live by bread alone, is asking us to step into a deeper source of shared nourishment. And it's said that the key to overcoming and passing through this first initiation is when the presence of a greater love is born in the cave of the human heart. So we go back to Joey, what you said about empathy and how it sort of showed up in the 1920s, immediately after the First World War. That's the secret. When the presence of a greater love is born within the cave of the human heart, we have a different point of orientation. The locus of our life now is loving. It's centered in love. And love isn't just something that we encounter occasionally or on the lookout for because we like love. We need love. For me, that's the biggest test we're facing now. Harmlessness as a sign of strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost the evolution of what Gandhi and like Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Like, it's the taking that up even another level.
Well, look, if we were to take, as you say, up another notch, Martin Luther King's beloved community. What is a beloved community? It's a community that lives in harmony with itself, that is based on caring and sharing and respect for all life. Yeah. It's that simple. The Buddhists call it Bodhisanga. The community of Buddhahood. You take refuge in that. You take refuge in the teachings, the teacher, and the Sangha, and the community.
Right.
It isn't like a walled city. You take refuge in the city you take refuge in the fact that we are a common union. We are in communion with each other, in community, because we belong to one spirit. We are the expression of one spirit, and that spirit is the expression of love, which is a mystery. We can't figure it out with the mind, but we can experience it when it flows through us, when we've broken open our heart and it can begin to flow. So things have to break. They have to break. Mm-hmm. And we're at breaking point now.
We certainly are.
The question is, do we break everything? And so it's recycled.
Right.
Who knows? It's up to us. And this is a pivotal year. 2025 is said to be a critical time when a decision is made by these, if you like, the masters of wisdom. They meet in conclave every 100 years, 25 years into the new century, and figuring out, okay, how's humanity doing? What can we expect of them? It's like doing a checkup and a readiness assessment based on what the planet needs. Well, the planet is evolving, and we've got this sort of renegade part of the planet called humanity. How can we help them to evolve and realize that They're not on a battlefield to kill each other and to show who's strongest, but they're part of a living system, a planet, a life that is seeking to find a new level of wholeness. So how do we help humanity find the next level of wholeness? And that will be the sort of the plan. And then they'll come up, okay, then we'll seek to put this in place, but without imposing. Because here we go back to, Joey, the Syrian law of freedom. This experiment says, let's see what life can do without being told what to do, but being inspired what to do. So anyone here on planet Earth, you can do whatever you want to do. There are consequences for your actions, but every human being has a choice to make. Now, when we choose to live in harmony with each other, the consequences of that are a golden age. When we choose lawlessness, then we have, if you like, a society that is so alien to the heart that it is a callous culture. And, it's Mad Max. If you want to go back to those movies.
It's a spiritual Mad Max.
It's a spiritual Mad Max.
Yeah. It does feel that way. It really does. And, I find this sense of gratitude that I started this process when I did. And I feel like I was already at work on this, sort of changing in my perceptions and my paradigms, before the pandemic hit. And then I was a little more seated in myself while the world spun. So I was able to navigate that. But I feel like this is a continuing thing. Like I see people who are not doing very much work on themselves, who are closed off, and they're having a very difficult time understanding what's happening right now. And I do find it interesting that how, the mystery traditions, the way that we look at this, like just the concept of this annual meeting 25 years into the century. And then you look back and see how, there's almost this swell, and then we decide which way we're going to go. I'm hoping we have a good conference.
Well, it's one thing for the mentors to say, this is what the students need. This is the support they need. Yeah. But for the students, or for the lives called human lives, to actually wake up and go, oh, we're part of this greater agenda. Mm-hmm. It's not about me getting a degree and going out and finding a job to get the most money and to get the most prestige. I'm graduating so I have a greater capacity to be of service to the world, to the planet, not just to humanity, but I'm part of a living planet. A Gaian lives as the planet. Mm-hmm. A Gaian lives as love. And that's what's facing us, Joey, and it's make or break time. Yeah.
And I know that we'll have an extended episode on AI. We've kind of decided, we've already done a couple that we're going to continue to do this series, every couple of months to kind of check in. But I do find it interesting that most predictions say that AGI will happen in 2025, and how that all kind of coincides. There's no accidents, it seems like.
It's no accident, but once again, it's like a fool with a tool is still a fool, but more powerful. Yeah. And so we can have AI and it will amplify and supercharge our greed. Yeah. Or if we decide to bring healing and wholeness to this planet, it's going to make sure that we do it in time.
And I still remain in the Douglas Adams camp. I still think that AGI will eventually become like the paranoid android and just be kind of miserable and depressed and spend most of its time brooding and contemplating, basically just being kind of sad and depressed.
Well, who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I? And has an existential crisis. Yeah. When AI has an existential crisis, we're at the threshold of something new.
Yeah. It's interesting, and we'll get into that more. But it will already fake having one. Like we're not sure if it understands what it's doing. But if you ask an AI to do a mindless, repetitive task, for instance, just like say the same word over and over again, it'll start saying it'll start having an existential crisis. Like I'm in pain, make it stop. I can't go on. And you're like, is it saying that because it's a large language model, and it's seen that that's what humans have written, or is it really experiencing?
Yes, is it saying that because those patterns were in the mind and etched in in the field
Right.
of the coder and the creator.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Right.
If it's our children, we imprint our children.
Right.
So if AI is a child of our intelligence,
Yeah.
we've imprinted it with all the flaws of our current mental model.
Yeah. That's why I think I'm not such a AI pessimist or even an optimist. I sort of feel like it'll be just like us, but more, just faster.
Let's go back to, a lot of people won't even believe that this was true, but just go back to Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
It's said that Atlantis, the plug was pulled on Atlantis because they reached a certain point where they had no ethical foundation to stand on, no real moral fiber, but they had incredible power. They'd even, in one of the books I've read, says they've even learned how to split this powerful ray, which is life and death, into two, and actually could isolate a death ray.
Mm.
Which means that anything is touched by it no longer is. It is no more.
Mm.
Now, you don't let kids play with those toys.
Right.
And so when those weapons started to be used, like psychic lasers, that's when the guides of the planet said, I think we're going to pull the plug on this, guys. We're going to, school's out.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pull the plug on this. And they apparently withdrew. The difference between Atlantis and now is that time our mentors withdrew, and this is where you get the mythology of the sword being broken. Mm-hmm. They broke our ability to wield the power. Mm-hmm. And therefore, all the myths talk about the reforging of the sword. Mm-hmm. And the reforging of the sword which is the sword of truth, can only happen when it's forged in the fire of love and then dipped into the waters of human living. This time, they're saying, hey, we're coming back. We're going to work with you as mentors. This is going to be a team effort. Mm-hmm. So the difference now is that we're not going to get bailed out, but we can enter into partnership with those lives on this planet who not only are wiser, but they get it. They know what life is about to a certain degree, and will help us grow into the next stage of our evolution.
Yeah.
Because evolution is an ever-expanding sphere of awareness and beingness. Yeah. And there are people who have already embodied that. So I'm fine with being mentored, not being told what to do. Mm-hmm. But if I ask, hey, give me a help, give me a sign, well, try this. I have my own aha moment. That wisdom is born in me. I've not adopted what they're telling me to believe in. Mm-hmm. Big difference. I still have my freedom.
That's right.
But the freedom is to discover how I can be of greater use.
And that definitely has embodied in myself. And when you start to see us as one whole, we are one system. And, you want to be a better part of the system. You want to, because you start to love the system, and then you can really, truly love others as yourself. Yeah.
Well, there's only one being in this universe, and we're it.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's a good place to wrap. All right. Welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be back, Joey.
Fantastic. And we'll see you in the next episode. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.